What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah. Today, I invite you again to grab a tasty beverage, a delicious snack, and a comfy chair, and let me talk at you for a minute. Today, the thing that I'd like to talk at you about is this game, Bushido Risen Sun. From here on out, I will be referring to it as Bushido. I'm not going to say the whole name every time, but the full name of the game is Bushido Risen Sun. It's from GCT Studios, a company out of the UK. Currently, unfortunately, there is no US distributor that we know of for the game, so you're going to be probably playing some shipping, but I think Noble Knight has the stuff sometimes, and with a lot of the companies, those companies, if you order enough, you can get free shipping. But that's enough of that conversation. Let's talk about the book. So, my buddy Bill bought a starter box, which comes with the small format size rule book, which is really, really sweet. This is kind of a full-size normal rule book. Comes in paperback. It's well bound. It's on a slightly colored texture paper, which for my purposes, I like it when I like a bright white paper because it's easier to see the highlighter that I put on everything. But that's a minor thing. The art, however, absolutely gorgeous. And there's lots of it. There's at least some drawing or painting rather on almost every single page. I have this model. I've recently acquired him. I didn't paint him like that because I didn't see this picture until just now. I didn't realize that that's how those were the colors they were using. But as with all things, you use whatever colors make you happy when you're into the act of painting. Bringing us into the first part of the book, which is the getting ready, the what you need of the game. And of course, you need a copy of the rules. Now, also, speaking of a copy of the rules, if you don't mind playing from a PDF or printing it out yourself, they do have the rules on their website for free. When I have an option to buy a rule book, I do, because I like having a physical book. I don't like having to print it myself, and because I like having a physical book. I like to see them on the shelf when I look at it. Other than that, we need a tape measure, and we measure in inches. You need some 6-sided dice. It recommends at least 10 of them, which would be then split, in 2 different colors, 5 of each, for a reason that we'll discuss in a little bit. You need some trackers, tokens. If you get the starter box, it does come with some thin cardboard, kind of cardstock tokens, and they work pretty well. I'm sure there are some other options out there if you want something nicer, if you want to make something yourself. That's always, an avenue that we have to express as wargamers. Next, we have some cards which come with the models, a 2x2 play area, so a very small footprint of a game, some terrain, 5 to 6 pieces is what most of the missions recommend, and 5 to 6 pieces of decent sized terrain on a 2x2 board really fills it up well. Now, that does leave the issue of if you don't have Asian or Japanese styled buildings, then that can be another investment that comes with the game. But you can absolutely just play the game, with clusters of rocks and trees and stuff in natural, kind of woodland settings. So you don't have to have those buildings. But if you're looking at it, with Hametsu is coming out here in the next few months, that'll be going out. So there, or if there's other games, historicals, things like that, and it's just a genre of terrain that you're looking to branch into with your collection, then by all means go for it. But you can absolutely get away with playing this game with just nat rocks, trees, things like that. After that, we come immediately into a glossary of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of terms and general terms. And that's good because I'm going to say up front, this game is fairly complex. The mechanics are not necessarily difficult to learn, especially the dice rolling mechanic. It's very straightforward, and you do it the same way for pretty much everything. However, the timing steps and the order of which things need to be done are a lot. It's a fairly in-depth timing, so I would give it a crunchiness of probably like 8 out of 10. I don't think it's definitely not, Mech Warrior crunchy, but there's a lot to pay attention to. There's a lot to keep up with, not in terms of bookkeeping, but again in terms of sequence of play and timing and properly spending. And sometimes, how do I put this diplomatically? English writers tend to lay the book out differently. If this, in fact, is written by an Englishman. I don't know that it is. But a lot of it, let me rephrase that. Rule sets from UK companies sometimes. It's not that the rules are bad, and it's not that the language is really incomprehensible. It's that they write with a different flow. Like the structuring of the rule book and where they put things is just different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And I say this because I always have a harder time with a lot of those games. Like 40K always gave me a hard, which 40K is expansive and bloated. And never mind. That's not why we're here. Never mind. Turn off the camera. Because we're not here to rag on the other guys. But other games, Bolt Action took me forever to get some of that stuff straight in my head, and I still sometimes have a hard time finding the things that I'm looking for in the rulebook, and that's really what it comes down to the difference that I'm talking about is, and I'm sure that it's not a problem. I think that it's probably not a problem from people across the pond. I think it may only be a problem for me. Maybe I'm just dumb as a brick. I don't know. I'm just saying. I have a hard time finding the stuff that I need sometimes. And that's part of the reason playing those games is part of the reason that I started doing this, which helps immensely for me, especially, again, in a complex game. But anyways, I digress. We got all of our big words as far as timing, summoning, size, distances, key boost, all these words that you might see. And for the most part, this is pretty comprehensive. Most of the things that we've needed to look up and kind of get a feel for are there. And at least just the only thing that I can think of that would really make this better, like that could improve upon the terms and concept section of the book, is if it cited the page numbers where like examples or where the actual rule is mentioned in the book. That would be very, very nice. Because that way, like if you needed to look up fear or frightened or you know what I mean, status effects. And I guess that's table of contents as well. Look at this beautiful piece of art. Undead Samurai. Yes, please. And thank you. Next, we come to the anatomy of the card section. This is what the cards are like. And one thing, and I just got kind of going on a little mini rant, but one thing that I really, really like about this game is that the cards for the models come in the box. Say that again. The cards for the models come in the box, and that is a huge deal to me. Take, for example, Carnivale, an amazing game that I love. It uses kind of stat cards. Why not just stick them in the box when you buy the model? I don't want to have to go print and download and whatever. I mean, I'll do it, and it's not that big a deal, but I'd rather just have it in the box. Now, one thing that I will say against this, and this is something that threw me real bad when we started playing this game, we actually get this part of the game wrong in our first, 1.5 battle reports that we filmed. And so far, but you kind of figured it out too late. I mentioned it in the video as well. We're learning. I'm just glad to be able to get the game to the table and share it, and so that people can see it. And then maybe we learn with us. Maybe some people help us out. But one thing that I wish was in this section right here, where it explains the weapon grids and everything that you see on that grid, I wish that there was a clear thing that said what the number beside it was and explained that was the cost. I wish that was right here, because this is where I expect to look for it, and it explains every other part of the grid except for that one little thing. So that is one thing that I would do personally terrain. And now we figured it out. We found the example that's given, and then we talk about. But it would be nice to have it there. And then moving into your special cards, which are enhancements, which are upgrades, weapons, armor, magic items, talismans, charms, things like that. We go to event cards, which are one-time use things that you can use when certain situations arise, or they can sway the game, help you, or potentially hinder your opponent, or maybe even both. And then we have terrain cards, which sometimes you can have like warband terrain, like cavern holes or spike pits or spider holes and stuff like that. So it's a neat thing, and that's part of that gets placed during the part of the timing of the terrain placement. And then we have the theme list cards, which is something that I really like. It requires you to have some list restrictions when you build your warband, but if you do that, you get some cool bonuses on the back end. So like I've been playing Shiho Clan, and they come with one called Flank, and as long as everybody in your warband is loyal or a samurai or both, then you can use this theme card, and then it gives you some special things that work with your flanking models when they come in from the outflank, or modifying the cost of certain abilities and things. It's really neat, and it's thematic, and it promotes good lists. I haven't seen any of them that I think are just insanely overpowered, but at the same time, I haven't seen that many. I've seen the ones that come in the Shiho pack, and I've seen the ones that come in the Cult of Ure pack. So those are the only ones that I've been exposed to. If there are, and there may be some out there that like combine with certain characters, and I'm sure there's some level of that in the game, but I'm not to that level of the game yet. I'm cracking in the surface and kind of sharing it with all of you as I go. After that, it gives you this brief little blurb on rules conflicts, which is the thing that I like. It gives me a hierarchy of troubleshooting a rules question. I like that kind of thing because I don't always want to go to the Facebook group or the forums or wherever. Like, it's just nice to have that. And they are that if one rule mentions another rule, then the rule A trumps rule B. It overrides it. The second one is that rules that stop something from happening take priority over rules that force something to happen. And then if that doesn't resolve your conflict, effects happen at the same time, the active player chooses the order to resolve them, is the final thing there. We then move into warband composition. The currency in the game is rice, which just seems odd. But I guess you're paying, you're feeding them for the time that they're with you. The starting recommended warband size is 70 rice. The standard kind of one-off playing a game kind of thing is 100 rice. And that includes your models, your enhancements, your themes, your events, all that stuff. Now, the game also accounts for Ronin, which a Ronin is a masterless warrior. It's a samurai, traditionally like a samurai without a lord or master. So you can include a certain number of Ronin. I'm not going to go deeply into that, but they're kind of models and units that are available to everybody. And so some of them are specific to a clan, like they'll only hire themselves out to this clan or that clan. And then I believe there are some that are just universal that anybody can use. But there are restrictions, as always, on using them, and using the Ronin kind of forces you out of some of your clan or group or culture, whatever specific themes. So I don't know if they're worth it. I haven't played around with any Ronin yet, but I'm going to get there, obviously, because we've got those models floating around. Or we don't have those models. Bill has those models floating around. And at that point, we're into game setup, which is our first, they give you these bulleted lists of the order in which to do things. And the deployment is probably the least important of those timing steps. But obviously, make your warband, pick a scenario, deploy the objectives first, whatever this scenario calls for. Then we go to terrain. So you make a tactical test, which is usually just 1d6 straight dice roll. And whoever wins is player one. Player one then puts a piece of terrain, and you go back and forth placing terrain. So you have at least 5 or 6 pieces, and then Once someone says pass, stop, I think we're good, then the other person may place one more piece. Now, we go through those steps, and then we add some kind of filler, scatter stuff just to pretty up the board for aesthetics mostly. After that, or while doing that, let me not skip this because this is important. So while doing that, you cannot put a piece of impassable terrain in a deployment zone, and you cannot put a piece of impassable terrain within 2 inches of an objective, which is something that we skirt the line on. Player 1 will then decide who deploys first. That player will deploy their entire force. Then the player 1 or whoever was going second will deploy their entire force. And at that point, the game turn begins. And the game turn is broken into 3 phases. The starting phase, the main phase, and the end phase. In the starting phase, several things will happen. First off, if there is a random turn or variable turn mechanic, which would be listed in the scenario, then you would roll for that first. After that, you generate your ki, which is kind of your mana, it's your energy, it's what you use to activate your special abilities and special attacks and defenses and things like that. All models gain 2 activation counters, and in this game, the activation counters go on the board with the model. We then take a tactical test, which is, again, just like the deployment tactical test. Normally, unless you have a special ability, is going to be a straight dice roll, and whoever is high roll wins that roll. You then resolve any effects that involves in the starting phase, and then you calculate pass tokens. You get pass tokens if you have fewer models than your opponent. You get a pass token for each model less than them that you have. Yes, player with the least gains the difference in pass tokens, so that you're not necessarily getting forced to activate all of your models and show all of your cards before your opponent has to do anything. It's a way to keep the turn balanced even when you lose models, and I like that because that is one of the things about skirmish games sometimes is if you knock 2 or 3 models out and then they've got to do everything that they're going to do while you can just sit back and wait on them to have to walk into you or put themselves into an unfortunate position. So this kind of alleviates some of that, and I do enjoy that about the game. Once everything in the starting phase has been completed, we move to the main phase, and this is where things get juicy and crunchy all at the same time. So first off, whoever won the tactical roll goes first. You are the active player. From that point, you may use active feats. An active feat is something that can be kind of tacked on to a regular action. Some feats have different timings. Some are instant, you can use them whenever. Some are active, they can be tacked on. Some are simple actions, some are complex actions. At this point, you can use any old active feat tacked on. Choose a model to activate. Declare whether they're going to do a simple or complex action. So in the game, you have 2 activation counters. You can use a single thing, not necessarily a single action token, but you can make a single action when you activate a model. So if you make a simple action, that means it's going to come back, you're going to be able to activate that model again and do something else with it. If it's a complex action, that takes both of your activation counters. So once you do that, that model is just done for the round, which that's kind of the beginning of the very, very complex but also rich and enjoyable action economy of this game. And I think that other than the setting, I think the action economy of this game is its absolute high point. The choices and decision trees that it forces you to think through are immaculate. At that point, the active model has its last chance to use any active feats, and then it passes to the other player and proceeds back and forth until no models have any activation counters on them. We then come to the end phase, where we resolve any effects that have the quotations happens in the end phase, and you always resolve the adverse effects before you resolve the good effects. Like if you had one guy that had a spell that was going to make him take a damage, and then he also had a buff that was going to make him heal a damage. I don't know if that's a thing in the game. I'm just trying to create an example. He would lose the life first, and then would gain the life from the good thing. Then you resolve status effects like fire, bleeding, and poison. And then anything that says it expires in the end phase goes away. Then you check for scoring according to your scenario, calculate those points, discard any unspent pass tokens, and then proceed back to the starting phase for the next round. And each scenario will specify for you how many rounds to play, or if you are going to play a variable round game length, which I have not played a variable length scenario yet, so I'm kind of intrigued to check that out whenever we get to it. Because whenever I play a game, I generally just play through the scenarios in order. I don't tend to jump around because it's easier for me to keep up with that way. Because I can just look at the last video and be like, oh, that was the last one I did. Okay, now I need to do this one. We then come into movement. So if you want to move with your activation, and there was a part here that threw me for a loop. And that's because I was looking in the wrong place for the information again, because I wasn't seeing it where I thought it would be. So when you move, if you're doing a walk action, just a regular old walk, or if you are moving as part of a key action, key feat, or as part of an attack, a melee, then you can kind of pivot around, but you have to make sure that if you're not attacking, you have to stay out of the zone of control. So a zone of control is this. It's a 1-inch bubble out to the front 180 of the model. There is facing in the game. Facing matters as far as determining your line of sight and things of that nature. Now, we have not found anything yet as far as where if you are hitting somebody in the back or anything like that, or charging somebody from behind, where it affects it. I think it's mainly for line of sight and the zone of control for, kind of controlling board spaces. Because you could effectively, if they really didn't want to get into melee with you, you kind of block off areas if you needed to. If you're moving, if you're moving as part of a melee attack, then you can move into that zone of control, but only of the model that you are going for. You can, in a regular walk, you just have to avoid their zone of control. At the end of that movement, that walk, you can adjust your facing however you see fit. If you run, which doubles, pretty sure if you run, you double your movement. I'll double check that. If you charge, then, or maybe it's movement and a half. I'll double check that. I'll come back to that. The thing with the run, though, you adjust your facing before you go, and then you go. Once you're done, you can't adjust that facing anymore. Same thing with the charge. You pick your direction before you're going, and then you go in a straight line. Right, so the charge is directly towards their zone of control. So you don't necessarily have to be able to charge straight to the model. You just have to be able to charge straight to their zone of control, which is that 180 arc, without interfering with any other enemy model zone of control. If you were to go into an enemy model zone of control, then your movement would just stop dead. So you could also kind of shield models a little bit. You can screen a little bit with it if you've got somebody that you're trying to protect. Then we come to the list of actions. So simple actions are melee actions, disengage actions, simple key feats, which again, if a key feat is simple, it'll be listed on the card, whether it'll be S for simple, C for complex, A for active, I for instant. You do a ranged attack, and a run action is 1.5 your movement. It's 1.5. You do a ranged attack. Now, if you move, we'll talk about that when we get to this section. Ranged attacks, stand-up actions if you got knocked down, which we haven't really encountered anything that knocks you down yet. A wait action or a walk action for the symbols. Now, some of them will have these little symbols beside them. See the little red circles, the feet and stuff, and that implies those are restrictions. So like with the B2B, you can't be base-to-base with another model and perform that simple action, or you can't move and perform that simple action. Our complex actions are charge, a complex key feat, a focus action, a complex scenario action, and that's it. A focus action generates 2 key, but again, you can't move and you can't be in the base-to-base to it. But it can help early game. I find it's kind of good with certain models to go ahead and jump start the amount of key that they have on them. We then come into a section explaining tests. So this is the core dice mechanic of the game. So let's say I'm shooting and I have a dice pool of 3. I roll my 3 dice. I take the highest number, so let's say a 5, and then I take any other numbers that aren't 1, so let's say a 2 and a 3. Each of those extra numbers that aren't the highest are support dice. They give you a +1 modifier to your final roll. So if I rolled a 5 and I had 2 other dice that were not 1s, I would have a total of 7. I then compare that 7 in the case of shooting to a target number, and if I'm higher than the target, if I meet or exceed the target number, then I've hit, and we would go to damage. I'm not going to talk about how damage works yet, but we are getting there. And that's your basic test. That's your tactical tests, your melee test, or your tactical tests, your shooting tests, your, I guess, a key test that you need to take. That's your basic dice mechanic, and that mechanic applies to all rolls. The supporting dice mechanic, that's for everything. The other type of main type of test in the game is an opposed test. Now, in an opposed test, you are, as the name suggests, rolling against your opponent. And here we have some more timing that is, again, just once you internalize it, it's not that bad, but getting it down and making sure you get it down correctly can be a bit of a crunch. But first, you figure out your dice pool, how many dice you have to roll. You then will declare if you're going to use any abilities or key feats to increase a statistic, and the active player declares second. Again, the active player is whoever it was activating the model at the time. Both players then roll their dice, conduct any rerolls that they may have from any abilities or anything else. Then both players remove any dice that are not a value of 1. Then you figure out your supporting dice and any modifiers that may be necessary. And then your final results are compared, and whoever has the higher number wins. In the case of a tie, whoever rolled the highest number of dice wins the tie. If you rolled the same number of dice, subtracting rolls of 1 from the total. Whoever had the total number of dice wins. And then otherwise, it's the active player wins. That's another thing that I think we may have been doing wrong when we played for the tiebreakers, is there was the highest number of successes. So I figured out another new thing about the game that I was doing incorrectly. That's how we learn. We then come to challenge tests, which are things that you have to do to, it's like a key challenge or a movement challenge test, and it'll have the test and then a bracketed number, which is your target number. So the same thing, you conduct your dice pool, decide if you're going to boost anything or not, roll your dice, do your re-rolls, remove any that are 1s, apply your modifiers, and then calculate your final result. If your final result is at or higher than the challenge number, you were successful. If you're ever called upon to do a size challenge test, which is something we have not experienced yet, there's a chart and you roll against it, and you have a number of dice that you roll for your size and a challenge number that you're looking for. That would be set out by whatever caused you to take the challenge. Tactical tests we've already talked about, so not going to do that. And then we have fear challenge tests. So if a model has the fear ability, it'll have the fear, and then it'll have a number, which is the challenge number for the fear test. If a model activates and declares an action or effect that would bring it into base to base, it has to take one of these tests. If an activating model with the fear trait declares an action that would, if the model has fear and is going to charge someone or come into base to base with somebody, the model it is coming into base to base with has to take a fear test. And if it fails, then it enters the frightened state. Then we come to ranged attacks, which is again a bulleted list of the order in which to do things. And some of this carries over, some of it doesn't. So with ranged attacks, you pick your weapon, if you have more than one. Then you measure the distance and determine if you have range, and if so, at what range band you are currently shooting. Now, if in the controlling player target model at this point, nominate a friendly model. So the person you're shooting at can choose for somebody else to jump in front of that arrow. If they have line of sight from the attacker crosses through their zone of control before it would hit the target's base. And if the model, the nominated model, is able to draw a line of sight to the activating model and is a valid target for the ranged attack. Nominated model is not exhausted or insignificant. So an exhausted model, that means exhausted means you have 0 activation counters, means that you cannot do it. And if the model was nominated and steps 1, 2, and 3 were met, then the nominated model becomes the new target, and then you just continue the attack. So then you would declare your use of key feats. It's the active model. That's your boosts or any special abilities or anything like that. Then you figure out your challenge number. Then at that point, if your weapon has the ammo trait, you see to make sure that you have ammo. If not, you make your ranged attack. Calculate your dice pool, roll your dice, do your re-rolls, remove your ones, apply your up to 2 support dice. Compare that result to the challenge number. Then declare your use of any instant or active key feats as the active player. And if the target was in base-to-base with an enemy, you must now check to see that you hit the correct target. So the active player, then you make your damage roll. So damage in this game uses a chart. This seems as good a time as any to discuss this. Here's what the chart looks like. It's a 2d6 chart where your x-axis is your success level. Success level is how much you beat either the target number or your opponent's dice roll by. So in the case of a ranged attack, let's say our target number is 4 because we're shooting them at point blank. We're right, not base to base with them, but right in their face, and we're going to shoot them in their face. Target number is 4. We managed to get a 7. That means that we beat 4 by 3 because 7 minus 4 is 3, which means our success level is 3. So we find the 3 on our x-axis, and then whatever we roll on our y-axis, which is 2 through 12, and then where the 2 meet, that is the amount of damage that you do. Now, if the model has armor, I'm pretty sure it deducts from that roll. We currently have not had any models that have armor, so we haven't gotten to that step yet. But I think that's how that works. Now, if your friend you were shooting and there was, you actually caught somebody, there you make a challenge 6 test with certain modifiers for size, and then if you pass the test, you hit your normal target. If you fail the test, then you would hit somebody else in that melee. Then we got another really cool piece of art. Snake Lady. We then come to melee exchanges. Now, this is a part that has tripped us up pretty bad throughout, but I think at this point we've got a pretty good hang of it. So once the models come into base to base, you rotate them so they face each other. So they're facing a line, so they're looking at each other. You choose your weapon, and the non-activating model chooses first. So the model who is being charged chooses their weapon first. Then you determine who has the initiative. Now, normally, the active model, whoever is coming into base to base, has the initiative. But there are certain abilities or weapon traits that will counteract that and give the initiative to the defending model. If both models have that rule, then the initiative would stay with the active model. Then everybody calculates up their dice pool and declare any key feats or key boosts or anything like that they're going to be doing. And just like in previous things, the defending model, the non-active model, declares what they're doing first. Once you've calculated your dice pools, and this is where it started to get hairy for us. In secret, you split your dice pool into 2 piles, attack and defense. Every time that you are engaged in a melee exchange, you have attack dice and defense dice. You are always doing both. Now, in our experience, it is wise, if possible, to leave 1 dice in defense. Because if you have no dice to roll and your opponent swings at you, your success level is 0. And whatever whatever success they get, that's how much they're going to beat you by, which can lead to straight insta-kills because you weren't defending yourself. And that makes sense. Now, this is one of those parts where the action economy of the game really shines through, because every time you're involved in a melee exchange, you have to think carefully about who you're fighting, how skilled that model may be, but also what your opponent is thinking. Like, is your opponent just going to shore up their defense? Are they scared and worried? Are they going to shore up their defense? Or are they going to try to come back out swinging at you to counter at you? And so, again, it creates those decisions that have to be made. Once you've allocated your dice, then, now this is before the reveal. You haven't revealed yet. So at that point, we move to step 6, which is once you've allocated your dice to attack and defense, you declare the use of any effects that are going to alter the cost of those attacks or defenses, or that add attacks or defenses. You will have secretly decided the use of these abilities in step 5. Now, these abilities and things, and this is one of the things that messed us up, have a cost usually, which is a bracket beside the ability. That's what that bracket means. And that bracket means that it costs a dice from your pool. Usually 1 dice, sometimes 0 dice. I haven't seen any that cost 2 dice. But it will deduct a dice from the pool to use that ability. So when you're still allocating your dice, you're accounting for the removal of those dice. You then announce simultaneously whether if you're using a special attack or defense, which would be what you paid the dice for. You can only, however, do one. You cannot do a special attack and a special defense. You only get one or the other. Then, if both players are still in base to base, both players roll all their dice simultaneously. Otherwise, the melee action ends now, and the activating model removes an activation. Because you could have an ability or something that you use there that would step you out of combat. That's why they have that mentioned. Then you do your rerolls, same as you always would. Remove or add dice last. Both players then calculate their final attack and defense results by selecting the highest dice, same as all the other dice rolling. And remember that if you roll no dice, that's what I was saying earlier, then that's the success level that you get. The attacker, so the active model, will then compare its final attack result against the defender's final defense result and go through, apply your special attacks, and then if the attacker was successful, you apply the special attack. If the defender was successful, you apply the special defenses. And if this results in either model being removed from the table, or the defender no longer being in base-to-base with the attacker, or the defender becoming prone, you would skip to step 14, which is the melee is resolved. Stop what you're doing. At that point, you can declare use of instant key feats, and then the attacker makes their damage roll against the defender, resolves that. If that attack causes the defender to become prone, or step away, or no longer be there, then you skip to 14. If the defender is still standing, then you run through those steps with the defender making the attacker roll on their swing back. But if you kill them in combat, they don't. If you charge in and you just cut them in half, they don't get to swing back at you. Is our understanding of that. And then any key boosts that you use to boost statistics or anything like that for the exchange go away. Also, worth mentioning, when you boost a stat, you can boost it up to double, but not above double. So if your stat was 2, the max you could boost it to would be 4, and that would require generally 6 key in order to do, which would take 3 turns to amass if you didn't use anything. There are also some melee pool modifiers, and these affect the dice pool, not the roll. So you have -1 to the pool if you are exhausted. You get -1 if the attacking model is being assisted. And it's per assisting model. If the model is prone, blind, stunned, frightened, or held, you have -1 per state that you have. If the model ran this turn, you have -1. If they're surprised, you have -1. And if they declare a stand-up action, you have -1. And then we're over to the wound table, which we've already talked about. Next, we come into some of the special attacks and what they do, and timing things, as well as bullets to help resolve like what would happen in certain situations. For example, if you were to slam or throw somebody into somebody else, then there are things I think that's where some of the size test stuff comes into play. And some of the special attacks range from combo attack, which is probably one of my favorites, to grapples, throws, stuns, and then we have our exceptional attacks and defenses and special defenses like counter strike, push, sidestep. Sidestep is one that I've used quite a bit. And then we have some diagrams, and there's a lot of these in the book, and they are very, very, very helpful. I found they're with the picture with the words does help a lot for understanding the way some of the stuff works. We then come into the model states, which are things like being diseased or poisoned or frightened or prone or whatever, and these are laid out in alphabetical order, and it even shows you what the token looks like. So if you don't have your tokens organized, if you just keep them in a box and you dump them out on the table, you can at least know what shape to look for in the process of getting the game set up and everything else. After that, we come into key feats, where we talk about the different types of feats: instant, active, simple, complex. Now, there's also a few different types of ranges. There's personal, targeted, aura, pulse, special, or an opposed key feat. And it gives you the legend for all of those. Now, also, and we'll talk, I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to hold on to that little tidbit. And then we come into traits, which are the different model traits that models can have. Things like ammo, aloof. These are most of your keywords. And again, it's great that this section is in the book. I absolutely adore that. However, any of the traits that you have are on the model's card, which is even better. Next section we come to is terrain, and the different types of terrain, such as difficult, normal, blocking, obscuring, enhancing, how it affects visibility, the size of it, and processes for setting them up, things to remember, and examples of each. So examples of impassable, difficult, clear, zero, difficult, obscuring, large. And that's good. I like examples. It helps me visualize and understand things better. And then we come into scenarios. I wish there were more scenarios in the game. There are 3. There are 3 scenarios in the main rulebook. I wish there were a lot more, or I wish there were some supplements out there that had more. And there may be, and I'm just not aware of them at the moment. That's highly, highly, highly possible. We then come into some fluff, and I like this. Now, this is something about this rulebook that I do really, really, really like. I like that at the beginning of the book, they jump straight into the rules. No dilly-dally, straight into the things that you need to know to play the game. And then they put the fluff at the end of the book. It doesn't really affect anything either way. I just like that particular layout choice, because it allows me, when I pick up the book, I'm straight into the stuff that I want and need to know. And it's pretty deep. You know, it's let me see, we got from page 85 to page 96, so 11 pages of different factions that are available in the game. There's a lot of variation. There's a lot of variation. And there's, you have some fantastical creatures and some things from Japanese folklore and myth, which is also very, very cool. And then we've got this beauty right here. This is an absolutely phenomenal quick reference chart. Absolutely. Cheers to GCT Studios. You put together an exceptional quick reference chart. The only thing that I would add to it is I would take those melee, those timing things, like for the melee phase, the ranged attack phase, I would take those. It gives you the modifiers, but I would take this timing steps. And I would take one more page of quick reference and put those timing steps right there at the back of the book, and that would make me very, very happy. But this is, despite those couple little gripes, which are very, very minor, because I have those pages tabbed, I know exactly where to go to find them. It's an excellent quick reference, and if this is your first time watching one of my videos, I am a sucker. If you want to win my heart as a game author, writer, developer, put a good quick reference in the book. And I will say so many good things about you. So many. And that brings us to the end of the book. The rule book was, I want to say, 30 to 35-ish bucks, something like that. So very middle of the road price tag. The models, I'm not exactly sure about their price tag. I want to say the $30 to $50 range. I probably should have looked that up, but I didn't, because I've yet to actually buy models for this game. Bill was gung-ho about this game, wanted to play it, and so he brought models and put them in front of me and we played. The big thing there is the shipping costs. So if you've got some buddies that want to play the game, or that you've talked into giving the game a try with you, maybe try to get together and group and order up. Or maybe check out eBay. But a lot of the models that are being sold on eBay are being sold by Noble Knight anyway, so there's still a shipping to deal with. But see, or group it together with some other games purchases, things. But it's definitely a game worth looking to. If you're into the setting, you like weird history, or you like altered history, or you like feudal Japan or Japanese folklore, or if you like an above average level of complexity and intricacy to a game and a good action economy, then this is a game for you to check out. Now remember, it's complex because of timing and action economy. It's not complex because of bloat and bad rules. The rule set is solid. It just takes a little while to get all the intricacies of it down and correct. So that's my take. That's my hot take on Bushido Risen Sun. I'm a fan. I'm looking forward to playing a lot more of it. If you can steer me, like if you play Bushido and you're really familiar with it, if you could steer me to where I could potentially find some more scenarios to play through, that would be absolutely amazing. Another thing to touch on is the game does not have any type of campaign or carryover mode, which is understandable because it uses the printed cards and there's a lot of stuff printed on the cards. But it would be neat. But it's not a deal breaker by any means. It's a solid competitive game that, if you like all the things that I've already mentioned, you should probably take a look at. Whether you decide to do that or not, I'd like to take a moment here right now to tell you thank you, and that I am extremely grateful that you stopped by and hung out today and let me talk at you. And I hope that you have an absolutely amazing and nerdy rest of your day. That was weird. Why did I do that? And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your favor.